friends, and welcome to The World Transformed. My name is Phil Bowermaster, and tonight we're talking about reopening the web. With me in the virtual studio is my co-host, Stephen Gordon. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, Phil. I didn't know it was closed. So we are reopening the web in a better way, I guess, is the thought here, right?
The web isn't exactly closed, so that's
right.
You make a good point. You make a good point there, but we're going to reopen it anyway. All right, so let's get into this. We did a show on Monday called Save the Billionaires, and we were talking about this piece from Medium called Survival of the Richest. And I want to open with one more quote from there, because I thought that actually gave us a nice entree into this topic. In fact, I ended the show saying, what's the next step? Well, here's an interesting next step for us. Here's what our author says in Survival of the Richest. He says, of course, it wasn't always this way. There was a brief moment in the early 1990s when the digital future felt open-ended and up for our invention. Technology was becoming a playground for the counterculture, who saw in it the opportunity to create a more inclusive, distributed, and pro-human future. But established business interests only saw new potentials for the same old extraction, and too many technologies were seduced by unicorn IPOs. And I read that and I go, okay, well, that's a pretty grim description, but it's not entirely inaccurate. And it's once again the thing we see so often. It's like, well, here's what the trend has been for the last 25 years. Therefore, that's what the trend must be forever, because nothing can ever change, right? It's like, oh, well, it's too bad that the Internet can never be anything other than what it is now, right? Because back then it had all that potential. And I think, well, that's just wrong, okay? If it changed one way, believe it or not, it can change in other ways too. And that leads us to this, I think, very encouraging headline. The web had failed to serve humanity. Tim Berners-Lee was crushed when Russia used Facebook to meddle in U.S. elections. Says he was devastated, and he is working on a platform named Solid to re-decentralize the Internet and take power away from monopolies like Google and Facebook. So the guy who gave us the World Wide Web is now stepping back in and saying, okay, yeah, we've gone too far in this direction. Let's see if we can't move it around in another direction. First off, what do you think, Stephen? Since you were skeptical about the title, do you think the web needs reopening? You think it's become too corporate, or you're okay with it the way it is?
Well, I think that these corporations have provided services, or they wouldn't be as powerful as they are, right? I mean, the reason...
Yeah, Stephen, the drug dealers make you feel good, or they would never have made as much money as they did.
Okay. That's a fair point. Not everything that these guys do is awesome. But if Google Docs wasn't great, or wasn't at least good enough, right, to allow me to collaborate with people in various places, things like that, then I would never have adopted it. If eBay didn't allow me to look and see, hey, this guy's got like one positive review out of 10, I don't think I'm going to trust him with my money. These things are successful, and a lot of the things I'm talking about began in the 90s, right? If they hadn't done a lot of things right, then they wouldn't be as successful as they are, is what I'm trying to say. So I'm thinking, these criticisms are exactly valid, but at the same time, maybe when we reopen the Internet, right, we perhaps use some of the ideas that these big interests have shown us, and maybe we do a Google Docs that's not searchable by an ad company, right? Maybe we do other things a little differently, peer-to-peer.
Yeah.
But maybe some of the same things.
Well, I think Google Docs is a really good example, because hardly anybody is going to point to it and say, see, the web's not decentralized anymore, because it's a great collaborative tool. Things like Google Docs are wonderful, and we've been using it. You and I have been using it since it was Writely, right, before it was Google Docs.
Before it was owned by Google, exactly. And it was glitchy and terrible, and it was still better than any other collaboration tool we had at the time. And so
remember sending Word documents back and forth between people? Huh? How fun was that? It's like, oh, which version? Which version? It's like Google Docs, this version, right? The one we've been looking at and working on. It's a fantastic productivity tool, collaboration tool, sharing tool, and it's the kind of thing the web is precisely supposed to do, and we love it. But to your point, it's also part of this information-sucking, life-peering at, trying to sell you crap behemoth that is Google, right? I mean, Google is this wonderful thing, but it's also this intrusive, looking over your shoulder, always putting something in your face thing, right? And so you say, well, which is Google? Is it the search engine that I use all the time? Is it the YouTube that we're on right now, right, that everyone's listening to? Is it these wonderful things? Is it these bad things? Well, it's both, right? It's not that these things became hugely successful because they weren't doing anything for people. They became hugely successful because they were doing something for people, which was your point that I glibly turned into an analogy to drug dealers. But there's something to that, right? I mean, there's
both the point I was making and your counterpoint has merit, I think.
The thing is, the drug dealer doesn't really care about your high, and certainly doesn't care about the quality of your life. To a certain extent, the big internet giants only care about the utility to the extent that it's making them bigger and more powerful, right? That's the trick. And you come back to these entities as companies versus the people who run them as individuals, and we kind of got into that a little bit on the show on Monday. I think there's a lot of vision with a lot of people at Google, and Google originally had a great vision. And Google may not even be the worst offender in this respect. But let's talk for a minute about what a less googly, less Netflix-ish, less Amazon internet might look like, right? How does that even come about? Tim Berners-Lee thinks he wants to serve humanity by taking those kinds of entities down a notch in terms of the power that they have over the internet. Is there technology that will enable that that's on the horizon, for one thing?
There's an article that came out in March of this year, Phil, from Wired. The decentralized internet is here with some glitches, is the name of the article. And one of the first things mentioned was an alternative to Google Docs called Graphite Docs. And what we're talking about here is a decentralized, you're still able to get the same level of collaboration. You can share documents and everything, but there's no central server. This is peer-to-peer stuff. It has much in common with blockchain and peer-to-peer type technologies, and it's completely open source. So there's nobody that's sucking away your data in order to target ads at you or something like that. This is just completely private, and it's encrypted. This particular thing is so that the keys to open it never leave your particular computer. While it is, pieces of your document might be shared here and there, it's all encrypted and nobody can get to it unless you intentionally share it with someone. And basically saying, this graphite docs and other things like it, there's a term for them, a larger term called DApps. And that's capital D, capital APPS is the term that is being floated right now to describe this. And I think that's just for decentralized apps. He's saying a lot of these things are glitch-ridden, still working through some problems, but it will allow people to regain some control over this stuff. And so this particular author is suggesting, hey, maybe we push in these directions and give some of these solutions a try. It'd sort of be stepping back to our Rightly days a little bit, glitchy and everything else, but maybe it's worth the try.
Now, it's interesting. To what extent can you put up with something that's a little bit glitchy, a little bit rough? We accepted things rough back in the days when there weren't slick alternatives, and I wonder if we're ready for that again. But if people can stomach that, then this might be positive in a couple of ways. For one thing, you might get the truly decentralized solutions that I think would be beneficial for people for a whole lot of reasons, and it also might inspire the big players to change how they're doing things, that they might have to respond to that, and they might have to do things differently too. So there are technologies that can definitely support this kind of thing. Blockchain, I think you mentioned, just peer-to-peer, different open source technologies. There's a whole host of ways of doing things differently. In fact, there was a whole storyline on the last 2 seasons of Silicon Valley. Obviously, it's a sitcom. It's a funny show, but they were seriously working on this kind of solution. That's been their big driver. Is they're going to provide this new open open source internet, where basically this new internet is built on the back of everyone's smartphone. The smartphones have become the new internet, and they're sharing things basically in this kind of blockchain, peer-to-peer way. And this may be the big killer app for blockchain. I've expressed a certain amount of skepticism about whether crypto is getting us anywhere other than making people who tout crypto rich right now, right? Whether cryptocurrencies are really doing anything other than being a lot of hype. But the technology that underpins it, blockchain, that might actually get us somewhere.
These cryptocurrencies, I have my doubts about as well. In order to mine these bitcoins and other cryptocurrencies, you need computers that can solve these really difficult math problems. So you end up running things that the amount of electricity needed to support an economy like that is ridiculous. So it just doesn't work. But maybe some of the things that we learn along the way will power the next wave of these apps that are mentioned in this article.
And it's fun to consider if we get that going, what's it look like? How do we use the internet? And I think the answer to that is we use it a lot like we used to, and that maybe using it will be in some ways similar to what it.
In the days before actual blogging took place, I almost had it was a proto blog, Bill, where I literally would do the HTML code.
Yep.
And I think you did some of that stuff too. This was in the 90s. It was the Wild West of internet. You didn't have a lot of people with services they were offering. So you just if you wanted to do something on the internet, you just had to kind of figure out a way to do it. To some extent, I guess it's back to the future, isn't it?
In some ways, I think it will be. It won't look as rough and ugly as it did then, and will have capabilities far beyond what we had back in those days. But yeah, I was thinking about when social media.
We got the 4Pay guys that serve as a model. Here's what we want. We don't want to do it through these guys anymore. We do want what they have to offer.
Well, the thing is, when Facebook really took off, it killed the blogosphere to a large extent. I mean, actually, there's still a lot of blogs out there, but you don't experience blogs the way you used to. You find links to blogs through Twitter, Facebook, and some of the others, right?
Right.
This layer got added that totally enriched Facebook, and obviously it did other things too, and it helped us all in a lot of ways. And it did. We're not going to go down the whole, is social media a good thing or a bad thing argument again, because we've already talked about it. But it killed the blogosphere as it existed. And blogosphere, when it came along, it kind of killed the whole GeoCities approach to, hey, I'm going to build a website. Right, I'm going to because right before that, people were cobbling together these websites, and probably GeoCities killed something that came before it killed Usenet. So there's an evolutionary thing that has to happen, but we're losing some of the quality, some of the properties at each stage, and maybe we regain some of those, and then maybe we end up with an experience that's just completely different from anything we've seen before. Maybe in some ways it will be like the original blogosphere, but maybe it will be almost kind of hard to picture right now, just because we're so used now to having these intermediary layers. Because I think about questions like, well, what will it be like if we can just watch movies, but there's not a Netflix interface, right? It's just we have access to that content, and we can use it. We can use it any way we want to. We can buy and sell things.
Well, there's illegal solutions. There are illegal solutions, but obviously you mean
legal ways of doing that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Where there's not this.
You want a decentralized Netflix where the content providers are happy and we as consumers are happy as well. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, and maybe Netflix provides it, but it's no longer you're dealing with this big entity called them. It's just that's part of what is your experience online. That you're getting that content that you want, and you feel less like you're dealing with some big player, and more like you've just created your own space, and you're interacting with other people who have their own space. It's interesting to imagine that. Those are the two that come to mind that really give me pause. I think, could we have media consumption at the level we have today without a Netflix or an Amazon or something like that? Could we be buying and selling things? Could the whole consumerist approach to the internet exist without Amazon or Alibaba or something like that, without those players there? And if you start to picture, there might be ways that we could have that functionality, but without those big corporate giant massive companies sitting on top of it, then you have
there's a runaway leader problem in this, though. The network's value is in the number of nodes that connects, right? So anyone that's going to pull out the next Facebook, for example, they are at a huge disadvantage because FreeBook. Phil, let's you and I launch a new service, FreeBook, that's going to be completely decentralized, peer-to-peer. Nobody's throwing ads at you. It's just so you can share photos of your pet cat. It's going to be great. No commercial entity involved. Here's the problem. The value of our network is just, so far, it just has 2 nodes, me and you. How are you going to get people to sign on to that, right? I mean, we're great and all.
Speaks for itself, Stephen. I don't even understand.
Exactly. He's just not quite grasping what the problem with this is. Huh?
Yeah.
Well, but I mean, it's not the service that you can log into and reconnect with old friends the way you could with Facebook.
I think that's right. The answer is that it won't be just a solution. There's not going to be a Facebook killer on its own. There's going to be, it's like, to use the computer analogy, we're going to have to take it all the way back to the operating system level, where the whole environment is replaced. And it's replaced because, for whatever reason, people say, well, this new way of doing it that throws all that other stuff away and gives me these new ways of doing it is better. And maybe not just because it's morally better or we feel safer or something like that, but it provides new benefits that we weren't expecting and lets us do things that we couldn't do before. Because people will go to something new if there's enough in it for them.
Right.
That's the key. But it'll be a big shift. It'll be as big a shift in some ways as going to the internet to begin with. So I don't know. We'll have to stay tuned. Is Tim Berners-Lee going to introduce something so compelling that people will actually give up their Facebook and their Netflix and their Amazon in favor of...
In the alternative, one of these big players does something so horrible that everybody's scared away from them. And we adopt these glitchy solutions because we just can't stomach these people anymore. It could, it could be one of those two things. We're either chased away from them, or we slowly drift to other decentralized solutions because they have something new to offer. It could be a combination of the two.
Those are both options. Yeah. Or 5 years from now, we should set a marker of some kind and rediscuss this. Have we become less centralized, or have we just doubled down and we've become even more centralized? This is one definitely to check in on, and we'll talk about it between now and 5 years from now. But it'd be interesting to kind of take a snapshot. We'll just remember this date, right? Where we were the 11th of July, and let's see what things are like in 2028, right? Maybe check in 10 years and see how decentralized the web has become. All right, well, we will check back in on it. Before that, we've got our Friday show to do. And, Stephen, we're going to talk a little geeky stuff. I hope you're ready for that.
Always.
The geeky stuff with purpose, absolutely. Well, it's been great talking with you. It's been great having you all with us. And until next time, live to see it.